The stars faded from the sky as dawn broke over the smoldering ruins of Ironheart Keep. Once a proud bastion of human civilization in Folkyr, the fortress now lay in ruin, its mighty walls breached, its towers toppled. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and the metallic tang of blood. Groknak the Younger, Warchief of the United Orcish clans, stood atop a mound of rubble that had once been the keep's great gate. His massive frame was silhouetted against the rising sun, his green skin marked with the scars of 100 battles. In his hand, he held aloft the skull splitter, a war hammer of terrible power that crackled with dark energy. "Hear me, sons and daughters of the Crucible." Groknak's voice boomed across the ruined courtyard. "For too long, we have fought amongst ourselves, spilling orcish blood for the amusement of our enemies. But no more. Today, we have struck a blow against the soft humans that will echo through the ages." A great cheer rose from the assembled orcish horde. They had done what many thought impossible, united the 5 great clans under a single banner and brought low one of the mightiest fortresses in all of Folkyr. As the orcs celebrated their victory, scouts reported movement on the horizon. A great host was approaching from the east, banners bearing the golden sun of the human kingdoms fluttering in the morning breeze. Groknak's eyes narrowed as he gazed upon the approaching army. "So," he growled, "the humans seek to test our mettle once more. Very well. Let them come. We shall meet them on the field of battle and show them the true might of the orcish people." High Paladin Solarian of the Sun Guard urged his white charger forward, his golden armor gleaming in the morning light. Behind him rode the flower of human chivalry, paladins in resplendent armor, each one a living conduit of the Primal Gods' power. As they crested a hill, the full extent of the devastation became clear. Ironheart Keep, which had stood for 1,000 years, was now little more than a smoking ruin. The fields before it were trampled and churned, littered with the bodies of the fallen. Solarian's jaw tightened beneath his helm. He had hoped to arrive in time to lift the siege, but it was clear they were too late. Now, all that remained was to exact vengeance and drive the orcish menace back to the volcanic wastelands from whence they came. "Brothers and sisters," Solarian addressed his fellow paladins, his voice carrying the weight of divine authority. "What we face today is no mere raiding party. The orcs have united, and in doing so, they threaten everything we hold dear. But take heart. We are the chosen of the Primal Gods, the shield that protects the innocent, the sword that smites the wicked. Terra grants us strength, Silva lends us vitality, Aquilo graces us with swiftness, and Ignis fuels our righteous fury." A chorus of 4 Folkyr rose from the assembled knights. Behind them, rank upon rank of human soldiers took up the cry. Archers knocked arrows to their bows, while priests clutched holy symbols and prepared healing magics. As the human army advanced across the field, the orcish horde emerged from the ruins of Ironheart Keep. The 5 great clans formed a sea of green muscle and crude iron, their war cries shaking the very earth. The Skullcrusher clan led the vanguard, their massive bodies covered in ritual scars and war paint. They beat their chests and roared challenges at the approaching humans. Behind them came the Flame Reaver clan, their bodies adorned with burning brands. They carried great torches and hurled balls of pitch, setting the dry grass of the field ablaze. The Ironhide clan formed an impenetrable wall of flesh and crude armor, their thick skins gleaming like polished stone in the morning light. Flitting through the shadows cast by the flames were the lithe forms of the Shadowstrike clan, their blades dripping with venom as they prepared for swift, deadly strikes. And at the rear, the Worldbreaker clan readied their siege engines, preparing to rain destruction upon the human lines. As the 2 armies faced each other across the field, an unnatural silence fell. The very air seemed to grow thick with tension, as if Folkyr itself held its breath in anticipation of the clash to come. The silence was shattered by the thunderous impact of Groknak's war hammer against his shield. The sound echoed across the battlefield like a crack of doom, and with it, the orcish horde surged forward. Solarian raised his sword high, its blade gleaming with holy light. "For Folkyr and the Primal Gods," he cried, spurring his charger forward. The Paladins of the Sun Guard formed a wedge behind him, their blessed shields locked together, presenting an unbreakable wall to the oncoming green tide. The two forces met with a sound like thunder. Orcish berserkers crashed against the Paladins' shield wall, their crude axes and massive fists beating against divinely protected steel. For a moment, it seemed as though even the Primal Gods' blessing might not be enough to withstand the Orcish onslaught. But then Solarian's voice rose above the din of battle. "Terra, lend us your strength," he cried. The ground beneath the Paladins' feet seemed to solidify, rooting them in place. Try as they might, the orcs could not break through. Seeing the center hold firm, Groknak bellowed orders to his flanks. The Flame Reaver clan surged forward, hurling gouts of unholy fire into the human ranks. Men screamed as they were engulfed in flames, their armor offering no protection against the magical inferno. But the humans were not defenseless against this assault. Priests of Aquilo stepped forward, their robes whipping in a wind that seemed to come from nowhere. They raised their hands to the sky and called upon their patron. "Aquilo, grace us with your breath," they intoned. A great gust of wind swept across the battlefield, extinguishing the Flame Reaver's fires and driving back the acrid smoke. The orcs howled in frustration as their advantage was nullified. With the center holding and the flanks stabilized, Solarian saw his chance. He led his paladins in a charge against the Orcish line, their swords cutting deep into green flesh. Divine light flashed with each strike, searing the orcs and driving them back. But the orcs were far from defeated. From the shadows leapt the assassins of the Shadowstrike clan, their poisoned blades finding gaps in the paladins' armor. Several knights fell, their bodies convulsing as venom coursed through their veins. As Solarian fought to regroup his forces, a new sound rose above the clamor of battle. A deep, rhythmic chanting echoed across the field. The Ironhide clan was calling upon the primal spirits of earth and stone, their flesh hardening further until they seemed more rock than flesh. These living statues waded into the fray, shrugging off sword blows and arrow strikes as if they were nothing more than gentle rain. They grabbed human soldiers in their stone-like hands, crushing armor and bone with equal ease. The battle hung in the balance, made their side able to gain a decisive advantage. Blood soaked into the earth of Folkyr, seeping down into places long forgotten by the races that walked above. As the sun reached its zenith, casting harsh light over the battlefield, a new horror emerged from the shadows of the fallen keep. At first, it was just a few pale forms flitting at the edges of perception, fallen soldiers rising again with an unnatural hunger gleaming in their eyes. But soon, their numbers grew. Vampires, drawn by the scent of spilled blood, crept onto the battlefield. These were not the noble lords of Umbervale, but feral, undead monstrosities driven mad by bloodlust. They fell upon wounded soldiers from both sides, their fangs tearing into flesh without discrimination. "Nightborn," cried a human soldier, his voice tinged with terror. "The cursed children of Morvran are upon us." The appearance of this new threat forced both armies to adapt. Orcish shamans called upon primal fire to drive back the vampires, while human priests raised walls of divine light. Yet still the undead came, their numbers seeming to grow with each passing moment. Solarian found himself fighting back-to-back with an Orcish warrior, their mutual disgust for the undead overriding their animosity for each other. His blessed sword cleaved through vampire flesh, leaving trails of burning light in its wake. Groknak, too, found himself beset by the undead menace. His warhammer crushed vampire skulls with each mighty swing, dark ichor splattering his green skin. "Is this your doing, human?" he roared at Solarian across the field. "This evil is none of our making, orc." Solarian shouted back, decapitating a vampire with a swift stroke. The Nightborn are enemies to all who live. As the battle raged on, more horrors joined the fray. Ghouls burst from the ground, their claws raking at the legs of the living. Wraiths swooped from the sky, their chilling touch stealing the breath from soldiers' lungs. The presence of these undead abominations seemed to warp the very fabric of reality around them. The sky darkened, as if the sun itself feared to look upon the carnage below. The air grew thick and heavy, pulsing with malevolent energy. In the heart of the battlefield, where the blood ran thickest, the ground began to bubble and churn. A miasma of foul vapors rose, carrying with it the whispers of things that should not be. Both human and orc felt a primal fear grip their hearts. This was beyond their ancestral enmity, beyond the conflicts that had shaped their histories. This was an awakening of something older, something that cared nothing for the petty struggles of mortal races. As if in response to this realization, the sky split asunder. A rift tore open in the very air, a yawning portal ringed with eldritch fire. And from this gate to realms beyond sanity poured horrors that defied comprehension. The Battle of Ironheart Fields had entered its final, terrible phase. The war between human and orc, paladin and shaman, was about to be overshadowed by a threat to Folkyr itself.